Jesus was a friend of children. In the midst of a crowd, when the children were coming to him and his disciples tried to shoo them all away, Jesus said this, "I want little children to come to me, so never interfere with them when they want to come, for heaven's kingdom realm is composed of beloved ones like these." So my Jesus is a friend of children. He welcomed and included society's outcasts and the lowest. So he was in a place where he met a Samaritan woman. You might have heard this story. And Samaritans were a race traditionally despised by the Jews. They weren't talked to. They were the lowest of the low. They weren't really counted. She was a woman, and women were both demeaned and disregarded. And she was an outcast from her own society. And yet Jesus sat with her. And he spoke with her, which in itself is shocking enough. He revealed things to her about her own life, and then he showed her a way of freedom, even in the midst of her circumstances. And she was the first evangelist. She went back to her hometown and she said, "Come and meet my friend Jesus, who's just told me all this stuff." Another time he was teaching in the temple, and the religious leaders brought in a woman who the Bible tells us was caught in the act of adultery. We have no record of where the man was, but that's by the by. But she was brought in, paraded in front of a load of men, probably hastily dressed or not at all if she's been caught in the act, and made to stand there, exposed and ashamed, while they quizzed Jesus about what they should do with her. And they quote the law at him because the law said she should be stoned to death for what she'd done. Jesus, his response, he crouches down on the ground and starts writing in the dust with his finger. What a profound, respectful way to take his gaze off this woman and give her some respect back. He didn't join in the staring at her in her nakedness. And his words to those religious, pious men, if you have never had a sinful desire in your life, then you can throw the first stone. Because he knew the heart of every single person that was standing there. And in fact, Jesus was the only sinless person that was standing there, and he chose not to pick up a stone. He scattered those hypocrites, and he showed mercy to her. He showered her with love, told her to go and sin no more, and sent her on her way. Jesus, my friends, physically touched people that no one else would go near. So lepers and dead bodies were never to be touched in those days by the Jews, because if you touched one of them, you yourself became unclean, and then you couldn't worship in the temple. So no one would touch them. We have account after account of Jesus reaching out his hands and touching the very people that no one else would go near, and bringing life and freedom and healing. He chose as his followers the most unlikely group of men. 7 of them were fishermen, unqualified, untrained. One was a tax collector, one of the most despised jobs at that time, because he was working for the Romans, who were occupying their place and politically and economically squeezing them, and he was working for them. And Jesus said, "You come, I want you." He welcomed into his company of friends the very man who he knew was going to betray him. Doesn't that just blow your mind? That he would welcome him in to walk with him, to live with him, to work with him. Another was a zealot, which is a passionate, over-the-top fanatic campaigning against politics or religion. You know, he'd have been the Spider-Man dressed on top of the Houses of Parliament or something, wouldn't he? He would have been a campaigner, a very outspoken and possibly violent campaigner. None of them were the normal run-of-the-mill candidates to take this good news of the kingdom of heaven into the rest of the world, but Jesus handpicked them. That means there's hope for us all. He challenged wrong systems and oppression. He called out the hypocrisy of the religious system. They were making others live up to rules that even they wouldn't follow. They set limits on who could access God and who couldn't. They did things for show, but they forgot love and mercy and justice. They were clean on the outside, but their hearts and their motives were evil and selfish. Listen to what Jesus said to them. You are nothing more than tombs painted over with white paint. Tombs that look shining and beautiful on the outside, but are filled with rotting corpses on the inside. He did not mince his words when he was talking to those that thought they were all this. And he said it as it was. And my friend Jesus offered a different way of life. He said, I have come to give you everything in abundance, more than you expect, life in its fullness until you overflow. He offered a way out of anxiety about our lives, what we'll eat and what we'll drink, our money and our provisions, because he offered access to his faithful, dependable heart, which is always turned to us for our good. He promised that he will stay with us to the end. He said, never forget that I am with you every day, even to the very end of the age. He promises a peace that lasts and impacts our lives, a peace that makes a difference in our everyday. And that's what Donna was talking about, that difference of having Jesus in. For those who said yes to my friend Jesus, he's moved in, become joined, taken up residence. He's not a visitor. You know, God does not want to be a visitor that we welcome. He wants to habit with us, cohabit with us without any separation. He said his followers would be persecuted, but that he's overcome the world. He said that the condition of our hearts is more significant than whether we act on the bad thoughts we have. He called his followers to live a life that honoured him above all else, was open and loving, to have integrity and honesty and go that extra mile, to be serious about living lives that please him. And he promised that he would give us everything we need to do that. He has never given us a set of commands that he hasn't then provided everything we need to fulfill them. Ever. My friend Jesus did all this. He was an illegitimate child. He was a refugee with his parents. He was verbally abused by the powers that be. He was rejected, abandoned, betrayed, let down, stripped, beaten, and murdered. Dying on the cross, being killed by the authorities as a sacrifice was how he could give us access back to a relationship with God. His choice to do that for us, because he did choose, at any point in that time, he could have said, nah, I'm not doing this. It was a choice. He even prayed to his Father, God, if there's any other way. But not my will, but your will be done. And he followed that through to the end. But his choice to do that means that each of us can now stand holy and blameless through faith in what he did, just like Donna experienced. And Jesus didn't stay dead, because that would be a really rubbish end to the story, wouldn't it? He was raised from the dead, and God restored him to his place of honour in heaven. And because of his death and resurrection, we are now invited to enter into the fullness of life that he offered and experience that unconditional love. Donna couldn't have experienced the unconditional love of God the Father unless Jesus had made that sacrifice. And as he did in his life, in the shame he experienced on the cross, he stands in solidarity with the shamed. He then took his understanding and experience of shame into heaven, where he now intercedes, intervenes, and advocates for us. So Jesus, far from being the distant judge God of the courtroom, is right down here, sharing our mess, understanding our shame. In 1859, a guy called John Duncan came up with the phrase, a thrilemma. We've heard of a dilemma, when you've got to choose between two things. He said, we have a thrilemma. He said Jesus was either deceived mankind by conscious fraud, so he intended to fool us. He himself was deluded and self-deceived, or he was divine. We have a trilemma. We have a choice to make. C.S. Lewis, the author of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe series, wrote this: "A man who is merely a man and said the sorts of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up as a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come up with any patronising nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He's not left that open to us. He did not intend to." So now that I've introduced you even briefly to my friend Jesus, the next step is up to you. We must calculate the offer, like he said to his disciples, to give up all we have and follow him. Give up all the shame and the pain, the worry, the insecurities, the fear. Give up all the stuff that keeps us bound and tied down. Exchange all of that for a freedom, love, acceptance, friendship with the God who made us and loves us. He doesn't promise a carefree, trouble-free, drama-free life. That would mean we'd need to leave this planet. But he promises himself, having been through the same human existence as us, having felt it all and won the victory over darkness and fear, we get to face this life with him. So an offer like this from Jesus demands a response. He is trustworthy. So when we say yes to him, when we say, "You are my Lord and my King, and I give it all to you," then we know he's got us. And whatever we may give up to follow him is nothing compared to the prize of being with him. So as we go into some sung worship now, which is our response to his majesty and his goodness, I'm going to be at the back. If you want to find out more, if you want to pray, if you want to have a chat, come and find me. And also talk over lunch. Grab somebody on the table and ask them about their friend Jesus. We would love to share the hope that we have with you this morning.